From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is Pollination, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and people like you who are making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Associate Professor of Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. You might remember a few years ago we had a podcast with Katie Buckley, who was then relatively new pollinator health coordinator from Washington State Department of Agriculture. Fast forward a couple years, and there's a lot going on in Washington. In this episode, we're going to catch up with Katie. We are going to hear about two new bills passed in the Washington Legislature designed to help bees. Also, we hear about the Washington Bee Atlas, this amazing bee atlas that has just blossomed in the state of Washington. Lots of participants, lots of discoveries already. But before we head up to Washington to get these exciting announcements, I have an announcement of my own I want to share. The Pollination podcast is still going to continue, but we are branching out into YouTube. The new YouTube channel is Pollinator Health at OSU. The podcasts are going to be living there as they are going to be, as you get them currently, but we're also going to have some additional content with video. So also, a lot of the interviews are going to start to incorporate video. So subscribe to the channel, Pollinator Health at OSU. And without further ado, let's head up to Washington with Katie Buckley. Welcome back to Pollination, Katie.
Thank you for having me again.
It's always exciting to look north of the Columbia. There's so much activity and exciting work. I remember we had you on the podcast when there was a lot of things getting off the ground. A lot of things are off the ground now, as well as some new legislation. So why don't you give us a catch up on most recently? There's been some new legislation in Washington. What do our Washington listeners need to know about it?
So we had two pollinator-related bills pass during the legislative session this year. One of them will, technically they both go into effect in June, but the actual date for the first one that I'm going to talk about doesn't actually take effect until January 1st, 2026. So we have some time. Okay. But that one is that neonicotinoid pesticides, which are a very common pesticide that have unfortunately been linked to some pollinator-related health issues, are now going to be a restricted use pesticide in the state of Washington, except for agricultural use.
So just so listeners, some listeners are licensed applicators. They know the distinction. What is a restricted use pesticide? What is being phased out?
So a restricted use pesticide is one that can only be used by licensed applicators. So if you have a pesticide license, you're doing it as part of a licensed application, then it's legal. So we wanted to make sure that we had that because there's a lot of invasive species. There might be some really severe pests, even in urban areas, that you need to use neonicotinoid pesticides to treat with, because neonics may have problems with pollinators, but they're relatively safe for example, humans, which not all pesticides are. So if you're a licensed applicator, you can use it. We're mostly trying to divert neonics away from homeowner usage. So just reducing the environmental load, how many of these chemicals are in our environment on the whole.
Yeah, and I guess the opposite of restricted use is general use, and that's what's going to happen is the stuff when you go into like a big box store, into the insecticide aisle, those products will no longer be available there. But for a licensed applicator who has a lot of training, they would, and I know both you and I do this in the states of Oregon, and we train them on how to understand the label around bee health, so they're better trained. For them, they'll still have product available.
Yeah, license applicators, as far as I know, in both of our states, have to go through not only a lot of training and pass exams to be able to get their license, but then they have to do continuing education as well. And that continuing education can be around, well, for example, pollinator protection, but also worker safety and all kinds of other stuff as well. So, I know I give a lot of pollinator protection training, and I know Anthony does as well, and I certainly know people who have attended both of our trainings, apparently. Um, so yeah, they're well aware of both the risks, but also when it is necessary to use these products.
Okay, and so that law is going to it's going to come into effect, but then there's going to be a period to just allow retailers to kind of get adjusted to the new drawdown inventories, and sort of next in January next year, those won't be on the Washington market.
2026. So
2026. So it gives a couple years to kind of
2 years. Yeah.
it is a lot of coordination in making these laws kind of roll out, but it's okay, great. That's good to know.
Yes.
So you said there's two. So what's the
There's
second
two.
one?
So that was 5972. The other one is 5934. This one I was really excited about because it's about pollinator habitat. So this one actually dovetails a little bit in with some of our other work through the Pollinator Health Task Force. Through that, we had basically said, if there is a public works project that involves landscaping, then 25% of that landscaping has to be pollinator habitat, which of course can look many different ways. It can be a bee lawn, it can be flowering trees, it can be flowering shrubs, it can be what most people think of like plantings of wildflowers. There's a lot of different ways that pollinator habitat can look, and we've really tried to not put restrictions on exactly how people do that. We do now have a forage list for pollinators up on our website, but with the caveat, we're still growing that list. It is not exclusive. Like, you can choose other stuff that's not on that list. It's just a guide. Anyway, so this new bill, because that was the old bill, is now encouraging municipalities, so cities and counties who do construction permits, to encourage construction companies to include pollinator habitat when they do landscaping. So it's not a requirement, but they can. We're asking the municipalities to include stuff like reduced registration fees, or they go to the head of line. I don't know exactly what it is. It's very much an encouragement thing on both sides. So
let me get this straight just before you go on, because I know there's more to this. But that
yes.
It would be, in some ways, by doing it that way, it gives municipalities, they can, we should maybe do this, and then they can sort of it gives them some flexibility, but it also just kind of lays it as a priority.
Yes.
Okay, that's a great idea. Cool.
Yeah. So we're obviously hoping that people take advantage of that. It's definitely, pollinator habitat has started to become much more common, many more people are thinking about it these days. So we're trying to encourage them in that direction. But that wasn't the only thing that bill did. The other thing it did was it did make it legal for people to put in pollinator habitat if they're, for example, in a HOA or a common interest land situation. So both HOAs and sorry, what is the legal definition? It's a common interest ownership. There we go. I never remember exactly what they're called. They can no longer restrict people from putting in pollinator habitat. They can, put some restrictions on how they do it, but they can't tell you that you can't.
I've heard this this has been a kind of lingering issue around the nation, is that the concerns from the HOA. I'm in an HOA, and things are done, and people have different perspectives in the HOA, and sometimes just to kind of please everybody, you kind of put turf down, but that
Yes.
that also for people who do want to do some pollinator habitat, it makes it impossible for them, and this I guess opens it up. But you still, I guess, have to negotiate you still have the HOA politics and need to, okay, it's got to be this height, and we're worried. But then it gives you at least you can't be outright refused, I suppose.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
so that was awesome. I was very excited about that because we've had people, there have been lawsuits in other states, and we just wanted to avoid that.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, that one I was really excited about because I like people to be able to put in native plants and not have to put in just grass if
Hmm.
they don't just want grass. So yeah, I was very excited that that one passed. And
That's
those were the
great.
two bills.
This is good, and I'm sure Washington listeners and also people other listeners from around the nation are going to be excited to hear about these updates. I guess just maybe turning things at a different angle. There's lots going on in Washington right now. You've got lots of programming and activity. Why don't you give us an update of exciting initiatives coming out of the pollinator program at Washington State Department of Agriculture?
Sure. So the biggest one coming out of our program, and the one that I'm probably most excited about, is our Washington Bee Atlas, which we're working with Oregon on. We're now starting our second year, and we have already hit 120 volunteers.
The
So
growth in Washington is so impressive. The commitment that people have, I'm astounded.
yeah, it's amazing how excited people are about this project. Even people who are like, I don't have the time, I can't do it, but oh my gosh, that's so cool that you guys are doing that. Um, I feel that sometimes because I have so many other duties, but we're even looking at maybe hiring a third person to help run that program for us,
So
hopefully by next year.
some people may have different things in mind when they have an atlas. Have in mind an atlas. What is the Washington Bee Atlas about? What's its focus and what does a volunteer do?
So the main focus is a statewide survey of all the bee species in the state. So we want to know, what do we have, where are they, and then somewhat secondary, but not really, are what flowers are they going to? What resources are they relying on? With that kind of information, once we actually have a fairly full species list, um, then we can start using that kind of ecological data to help with habitat restoration and, you know, making recommendations or better recommendations for putting in pollinator habitat. So that forage list, like I talked about, that's going to be growing because of this work. So it's really exciting. As a volunteer, you get trained to go out and collect bees off of flowers, and using iNaturalist, collect all of that data and then pin those bees up, and you get to send them in to our taxonomist, Karen Wright, who is awesome. And she identifies all of them, and then you eventually we're we're trying to let her have enough time to do that. So in a year or two, you'll find out what bees you actually collected. So yeah, we already have, she's told me that now that she's actually gotten all of the bees from the first year and actually had a little bit of time to start looking at them, there's already like a dozen state records that we had no idea
Oh my
were in
God, that's
Washington.
amazing.
It's
It must
amazing. It's so cool.
it might for some listeners it might be kind of incredible that they might have been under the assumption that states have uh, inventories of bees, but out west we largely don't. And I guess what I think is really amazing about this initiative is it comes from the State Department of Agriculture. This is really unique um, that hasn't happened before. This is kind of like a new thing.
So yeah, WSU is like, we already have the master gardeners. We don't want another big volunteer program. And WDFW is like, we only do endangered species. We don't have the personnel to do this. So by default, it came to us. And I'm so happy that it did. And WSU and WDFW are still helping us with this, but they were just like, we don't have the capacity. So
Well, I suppose state departments of agriculture are in some ways a good fit because you do have a lot of departments of agriculture typically are a kind of main hub of entomologists. There's a lot of entomologists within state departments of agriculture.
we do
Um,
have a lot. Most of them, however, are in the pest program. There's only really two of us in the pollinator program out of, all three of our
that's
personnel.
the unique thing, but it's kind of like I imagine in these departments, there's people, there's a collection, they understand entomological curation. Like it's in some ways, it's kind of that other states haven't thought of this as kind of, it,
I actually find it really hilarious. Not all of our entomologists have been like super excited by this project, but several of them are like, "You mean I get an excuse to go out and collect like bees and really cool stuff and not just, my invasive species that I always work on?" Um, we have multiple volunteers from the WSDA who are in our program already because they heard about it and they were so excited. So some of them weren't even the entomologists.
Well, it is amazing. The growth is amazing, and I imagine there's just covering that northwest coast fauna. There's going to be so many interesting discoveries, and a really great complement to all the really strong pollinator programming coming out of the state of Washington.
Yeah, it's been great to see how many people are super interested and excited and invested in bees and other pollinators. I field phone calls all the time. Not just from people who are interested in the Washington Bee Atlas, but asking how do I put in pollinator habitat? Um, I'm interested in having a beehive, and they want to learn more and they want to do it right. Uh, and this stuff keeps growing. Uh, I got invited to an event over in the Seattle area in a couple weekends, and apparently it went from, I don't know, like 15 booths the first year, and I think they have over 30 this year. Um,
Amazing.
so yeah, it's amazing, and I'm so excited that I get to be part of all of this work and get to talk to all of these people about pollinators because it's what I like to.
Well, and that, for those, if you've been living under a rock in Washington and you don't know how do I find out about these programs, how do I get involved, what do you tell those people listening?
Well, you can check our website, which I am slowly getting updated and getting more and more stuff on, or you can just email me. That's how a lot of people find out. Is they email me and ask, hey, I'm in this area. How do I get involved? Where do I find stuff? Because there's county level programs, there's regional programs, there's nonprofits. There's so many different people who are working on pollinators in different places that I it's hard to tell them, a one size fits all type thing, but I'm hoping to get at least a maybe regional and possibly county list of all the people who are working on stuff at some point up on our website, but I keep finding new people.
Well, that is great. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. I'm so excited. I'm always look up north and see all of this programming, and it's just so inspiring.
Well, you guys are very inspiring for us too. It's always really cool to see what you guys are doing and maybe sometimes crib off of your notes, but
Well, I will say it has been great for Oregon listeners. It has been really great to have a collaborative arrangement with Washington. As a region, I think we look our programming is really innovative, and we've been able to other larger more populous states are looking to the Pacific Northwest with for ideas because I think there's been a lot of activity in the region.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't have the job that I do now if, Washingtonians weren't interested in this kind of thing. It's kind of inspirational to me that a lot of these people who are not entomologists, this is not what they do all the time, are still really interested and invested uh, in trying to help them. And I mean, I can tell you how important they are because they are. Uh, but the fact that there were so many people out there who recognize that and want to support us in this region is really cool. And I don't think we're the only ones doing that kind of thing, but we're pretty awesome about it.
Isn't it fascinating though? I do that just that first thing about it. I do think there's something about Washingtonians. The level of support has been, super incredible. But there's also a lot of people who just aren't entomologists. You didn't have to go back a few decades, and then people were just afraid of bees, and that really has changed. It's to
Yeah.
me, it's kind of like bracing.
It's also really interesting to me that there has been this interest and fascination at this same time that there was something else going on, the
Oh
northern
yeah, that's
giant
right.
hornet that really
Hmm.
scared a lot of people, which, by the way, I can tell you we are now 2 years without finding any in a very extensive trapping program. So we got one more year this year before we can declare it eradicated. So that
Go
one's
Washington.
that was really great news. I'm very happy about that. But while that was going on and people were kind of freaking out about it, like we came right on the heels of that, opening up this program, and like nobody is scared
Oh
of
yeah.
bees who are interested in this. Like no one's worried about it. Like I do have a northern giant hornet thing, and they go, "Wow, that's really terrifying." And then I talk to them about bees, and they're like, "Bees are so cool." I'm just like,
That is
so
right. Yeah,
I'm
people
so
can tell
happy
the
that people are
difference.
starting to recognize the difference between.
No, that's it. For years, it was like bees, they sting, and then you'd get these things like these bees are at my picnic table, and now we've reached a point where people are like, oh, those are yellow jackets, these are bees, those are hornets. I
Yeah,
understand.
I'm so happy that that's now a thing. And I gotta say, I gotta give Carla Salp, our communications person who started the "Is this a hornet?" campaign with photos of like a whole bunch of stuff that were not hornets. I think a lot of people learned like, oh, that's what a bumblebee looks like, and that's what a sawfly looks like. I didn't even know there were sawflies. Um,
I I think all of us around the nation appreciated the remarkable communication strategy of Washington State Department of Agriculture. Carla's work was top notch,
yeah.
really engaging, sometimes kind of funny, but really it was not the kind of public service message that you remember from our childhood. It was very innovative. It was such a great job. There should be a State Department of Agriculture Communications Award, and she should get it.
Uh, yes, yes, there should be. I have been continuously impressed by the entire Hornet team. Carla and Cassie have just been phenomenal. Um, so yeah, they've both of them have been a joy to work with, and Carla's been helping with the Washington Bee Atlas stuff. She's one of
Well,
those
I know I do.
volunteers who is
I
not an entomologist, and
we I am I have a small piece in this whole massive thing of being the person who grades the assignments, and I do see Carla's assignments come through, and I'm always like, oh, look at her go.
yes, she was traveling. Was that this past Saturday? I was doing an event. Our Yakima Arboretum does Arbor Fest every year for families and kids. So she stopped by to take outreach photos of me doing stuff and being very exciting working with children. She was like, "Yeah, so the rest of the day I'm gonna go collect bees for the atlas." So yeah, she's on the clock all the time, man.
Well, anyway, it is a remarkable team, and thank you so much for the updates. I will have a link in the show notes. I'm a little bit behind on show notes, but you can always. What's the website, just in case I am slow with the
agr.wa/pollinators.
So easy. You don't even need show notes. Okay. Thank you so much, Katie. We'll have you on probably next year to hear about like a whole host of new initiatives coming north of the Columbia.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for listening. Show notes with links from each episode are available at the website pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's a form at the website where you can pop in and say hello and give me feedback. If you want to support the show, remember to leave a rating on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast mothership you use. And finally, if you have the means and you want to help support my lab's effort to document bee biodiversity in Oregon, visit OregonBeeAtlas.org and follow down to the donate button where you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Jerry and Judith Paul Native Pollinator Endowment. Every little bit helps. See you next episode.